Well, we established 2 weeks ago that the ball is in Brandon Aiyuk's court. He may not be fully medically cleared at this point, but that inflection point is at least rapidly approaching. But there's obviously drama beyond that. And it has been unclear whether or not Brandon Aiyuk would be willing to play for the 49ers, even if he were medically cleared and even if he did risk losing even more money by not playing. That's been the groundwork around this entire Brandon Aiyuk gray area. Ball's in his court. Will he pass it back to San Francisco? John Lynch just spoke on KMBR, and it certainly sounds that optimism is dwindling, that Brandon Aiyuk is going to be willing to pass the ball back to the 49ers. John Lynch was asked, if it's realistic that Brandon Aiyuk plays for the 49ers this year. Here's his answer.
Realistic, I'm not sure. Hopeful, yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'd leave that. He continues to rehab, and hopefully that's, like I've always said, is we're a better football team when Brandon's out there, and I hope that's the case. But I think that's probably what it is hope right now, and I wish it were a little bit more than that.
One more time at the very start. Is it realistic?
Realistic, I'm not sure. Hopeful, yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'd leave that. He continues to rehab, and hopefully that's, like I've always said, is we're a better football team when Brandon's out there, and I hope that's the case. But I think that's probably what it is hope right now, and I wish it were a little bit more than that.
I wish it were a little bit more than that. John Lynch, typically optimistic. This time, he's hopeful that Brandon Aiyuk will come around and Brandon Aiyuk will want to contribute to the team once he is cleared. He continues to rehab, but you heard the 49ers talk about this over the course of September. Even in October, they were saying that Aiyuk was improving on a week-by-week basis. They said that this actually was a week-by-week proposition of when his practice window would open, when he would be cleared. And then John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have both said that at a certain point he plateaued. So was that a physical plateau, or was that an attitude plateau from Brandon Aiyuk? And it certainly sounds like the latter based on the tea leaves that we've been gathering. Brock Purdy also spoke about this on KMBR after John Lynch, and he said that there's a lot of gray area. He mentioned the Brandon Aiyuk injury recovery, but then he also mentioned the contract stuff. He said, I don't know a lot about the contract stuff. That's not my business, but he still mentioned the contract stuff. And that means that it's obviously there on everyone's mind, and it's obviously a factor in this entire Brandon Aiyuk melodrama. The 49ers could really, really use Brandon out on the football field. I think that's the greatest tragedy of all this, is that the team, they're 9-4. The Super Bowl and that window wide open because there's so much parity in this league right now. And one of the shortcomings of this 49ers offense, which I think still has a chance to be elite even without Brandon Aiyuk, we saw what Brock Purdy and company were able to do against the Cleveland Browns. But one of the shortcomings of this offense has been the lack of firepower at the X wide receiver position. They're getting a ton out of George Kittle. They're getting a ton out of Christian McCaffrey. They obviously haven't gotten a lot out of Ricky Pearsall ever since he got hurt. And then there's been this rotating crew of productive receivers that has filled in for either Pearsall or Brandon Aiyuk, if you want to look at it in the big picture. I know Kendrick Bourne had a couple huge games earlier this year. I know that Jawan Jennings produced big against the Cleveland Browns, but there hadn't been that steady X space-making kind of presence that the 49ers had back when Brandon Aiyuk was healthy. Now, even if Brandon Aiyuk does, it seems that it'd be almost miraculous at this point. If his attitude does change and he does want to get back out there for the 49ers this season, I wouldn't expect him to be his 2023 self. But I think he's still a really, really talented guy who can block, who played the game the right way. I mean, he earned every bit of that contract with his play in 2023. I think that would be tremendously beneficial to this 49ers offense. So we have the receiving production table from SF Data Niners. This comes from the game on Sunday in Cleveland. Juwan Jennings had a big game. He caught that touchdown. Now, it was only 4 catches for 39 yards, but that was a game where passing production came at an absolute premium. And Juwan Jennings, every time he was targeted, he added over an expected point to the 49ers ledger. So this was really, really quality, efficient football from Juwan Jennings, and a tough situation against one of the best defenses in the league with a lot of wind blowing off of Lake Erie. So this was a Juwan Jennings game, and he sealed the game with his touchdown at the very end. It's always a Christian McCaffrey game. It's always a George Kittle game when he's healthy. I think it should be more of a Kyle Juszczyk game. I think the 49ers do need to target him more, and I think that we might be seeing that on a more pronounced level because they are a little bit shorthanded at that receiver position. So they're having to go to some of these auxiliary weapons instead. Ricky Pearsall did make a huge catch for San Francisco near the end of the first half that set up the bigger throw to George Kittle. And I do believe that Ricky Pearsall is going to be continually more and more integrated into this 49ers offense because he was going off before the PCL injury in week 4 against Jacksonville. So it's probably just taken a little bit of time to get Ricky Pearsall back in the progression flow. And that should help pick up some of the slack that I think that the 49ers are dealing with right now. But you can't get around the fact that they could use Brandon Aiyuk. And by extension, you have to agree that it's tragic that whatever the reason for it to come like this, because it doesn't seem like rational behavior from the outside, but I don't know the reasons from the inside. It seems like the 49ers are dealing with a lot of gray area too. Brock Purdy literally called it gray area today. But for whatever reason, Brandon Aiyuk is unlikely to help this team, even if that knee comes to a point where physically he can't help this team. That's where we're standing right now. Ball in Brandon Ayuk's court, but it seems increasingly unlikely that he's going to pass it back. And we can speculate all we want as to why. John Lynch today talked a little bit more about what might have gone down. We know that his guarantees were voided back in July. On the KMBR morning show, they asked John Lynch if the reporting to training camp was an issue. And John Lynch said, I'm not sure if the reporting was an inflection point. He said the entire time it hasn't been great. So apparently it's not that Brandon Aiyuk showed up late to training camp or didn't report on the first day, and there was a clause in his contract that voided the guarantees. That doesn't seem like it was what happened. It seems that there have been multiple things. When John Lynch says the entire time it hasn't been great, and then he added, everyone has to be a professional and conduct themselves in that manner, not that matter. Everyone has to be a professional and conduct themselves in that manner. He didn't directly say that Brandon Aiyuk has not conducted himself in a professional manner, but I think that we could read in between the lines. And that is one of the lines that John Lynch said to KMBR. Now, he also added that, quote, great thing about this is it's not over. We can take this. We can move forward, end quote. The 49ers obviously want to move forward. They've got Brandon Aiyuk under contract beyond this season. They signed him to that much money because they thought he was going to be an A-list pillar for them in that receiver room. You see, when you look at some of the efficiency charts from this game where Brandon Aiyuk would fit in, apparently there's been contract violating behavior from Brandon Ayuk's side, which has led to the voiding of guarantees, and Aiyuk chose to not even fight those voidings through the NFLPA. But the 49ers believe, hey, the contract is still there. The guarantees have just been voided. They think that at least some people in the building, maybe John Lynch is one of the few people in the building, but some people think that the relationship has a chance to be mended and the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk can move forward. And that's what Lynch said at the end of his call with KMBR today. Great thing about this is that it's not over. We can take this. We can move forward. However, this is one of the many situations where it takes two to tango. 49ers can be willing to move forward. They can be willing to toss the ball into Brandon Aiyuk's court. But again, if he's not willing to toss it back for whatever reason, rational or irrational, then you're not going to have Brandon Aiyuk on the field helping out this team. And then you could start talking about, well, if that's a completely intractable situation, if Brandon Aiyuk is just wanting to be released so he could sign with Washington, or I don't know, I'm speculating here. If Brandon Aiyuk is willing to sacrifice tens of millions in 2026 and beyond, and if he's willing to sacrifice money in 2025, because if he refuses to play for the 49ers, even if he's cleared in 2025, they could recoup some of that money as well. That's what we talk about, the 49ers being incentivized to force the issue and open up Brandon Aiyuk's practice window, even if they're not believing that he's going to report the practice. But if Brandon Aiyuk is willing to do all this and all that and forego tens of millions of dollars in 2025 and beyond just to get out of the building, well, at some point the 49ers they're just going to shrug their shoulders and they'll let him out of the building. These contracts are built to protect both the player and the team. And the latter part of that equation is the one that we're talking about right now, because if Brandon Aiyuk is not living up to the language of the contract, then the 49ers have recourse to make it financially hurt for him. And normally that recourse, in a rational world, that recourse is what convinces a player to live up to the obligations of his contract. But if even that doesn't work, then, the contract doesn't have any effective teeth, if you will. If Brandon Aiyuk doesn't care about the money that the 49ers won't pay through guarantees or might take away in 2025. And at that point, you would look at potential releases or potential trade at the end of the season. It sounds like there's been so little communication between the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk. And again, this is just me reading in between the lines. It might be really hard to trade him just because of the lack of communication, because in any trade, there would have to be an agreement from Brandon Aiyuk about which team the 49ers are trading him to, because the team acquiring the contract, still 3 years left on it beyond 2025, would almost certainly like to rework the deal. And there's a lot of money coming to Brandon Aiyuk in an option bonus that is due on September 1st. I think $25 million. He hadn't played since early 2024. There have only been dramatic off-field issues since then. There hadn't been all too much to indicate that he's going to be back to his 2023 self the very next time he takes the field. So I find it hard to believe that a team is going to want to trade for a contract that has an option kicking in on September 1st worth $25 million unless they can get agreement from Brandon Aiyuk and his camp to renegotiate the contract. So the 49ers have the contractual control. They might have voided the guarantees. That $25 million option had previously been guaranteed, but it's still there. It's still set the trigger on September 1st. So if you try to offload it like a hot potato, you have to find somebody that's willing to catch it. And another team is only going to be willing to catch the hot potato if it doesn't have a $25 million option that triggers on September 1st. And the only way that happens is if Brandon Aiyuk is willing to work with the 49ers on a trade. And if he just wants to force his way to a certain location, he does have a little bit of leverage because of the contract that he signed, because of that option that triggers on September 1st. He does have that kind of leverage that he doesn't have to work with the 49ers on any potential trade. And at that point, they would have to release him almost certainly with a post-June 1st designation. If the 49ers do that, a post-June 1st designation of Brandon Aiyuk would actually save them 2025 salary cap space. That is why the news that we got 2 weeks ago was such good news for the 49ers, and they had been sitting on it since July, but either way, it's good news. They were able to void Brandon Aiyuk's guarantees without Brandon Aiyuk fighting back, and the statute of limitations there, the 50-day window for him to fight back with NFLPA has expired. Because they no longer owe him that money in 2026, they can actually release him this offseason and gain 2025 salary cap space, gain up to $85 million of total salary cap space. It's connected from year to year. They can get out from under that. They can get out from under the, well, however much it was, 28, 29 million in guarantees that are no longer guaranteed. They can do that because of what was voided back in July. So when this offseason initially started, we thought that the 49ers were hopelessly tethered to this contract for at least one more year, that would be major financial damage for San Francisco to just move on from Brandon Aiyuk through a release because of the guarantee that had triggered in 2026. But the behavior of Brandon Aiyuk allowed the 49ers to terminate those guarantees, void those guarantees. And now he's just sitting there with the same contract, but without those guarantees. It's much more movable through release for the 49ers. Whether or not it's movable through trade depends on the level of cooperation from Brandon Aiyuk. And it just doesn't seem like that's a thing right now, based on that was the least optimistic that I've heard John Lynch ever talk about anything. Now, he did add at the end that the great thing about this is that it's not over. We can move forward from this. But before that, he said that the entire time it hasn't been great. And he said that he wishes that he had a little bit more than hope at this point. He wishes that there was some realistic basis for optimism. But at this moment, based on Brandon Aiyuk not returning the ball to the 49ers, based on that ball just staying in his court, this is where San Francisco is with their receiver. All right, moving on to Brock Purdy and the Dougie. Brock Purdy also spoke on KMBR today. Now, this was some good stuff. Let's listen to Brock Purdy talking about his dance moves.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're all going to be Douging from here on out as a team. So,
can you give us the backstory? Somebody wrote in and said it was a Baker Mayfield tribute, or is that fake news?
That's fake news. I mean, I think there was a viral video of him hitting it, years ago, and that was great. But for me, this year, I was like, you know what? Like, I can't wait to score when I run one in, and I just want to get the guys going by doing something. And I was like, I can hit the Dougie. So it's really how it came about, yeah.
So, Brock, what is your history with the Dougie? Because I know we all have our go-to dance moves. Was this something that maybe you were pulling out on your wedding night?
Oh, yeah. I definitely was hitting it, on the wedding dance floor. And I got the same reaction from all my family and friends. Like, what the heck? Like, rocking Dougie. And so I've sort of just been, I guess, sitting on it and waiting for the right opportunity to do it after a touchdown or a big moment. So why not in Cleveland? So.
You're surprised by the reaction? Because here we are talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, I scored. I looked at all the Cleveland fans, and they're booing me. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to just whip out the Dougie on them. And then people were talking about it. But I don't know. It's just more than anything just having fun with, playing the game and with my teammates.
What was Jenna's reaction?
She loved it. She texted me after, and she's like, great game and stuff. And then she's like, by the way, I actually really liked your Dougie. And I was like, let's go. That's all that matters.
Brock Purdy, they're right. That's going to be talked about here for a few weeks. I mean, that might become his signature move after scoring touchdowns. And I think that'd be quite fun. We got the article up on the San Francisco Standard. Kyle Shanahan's 49ers are executing a formula that has produced deep playoff runs. The 49ers now in such an intriguing spot. John Lynch today on KMBR, I think, summarized it very, very concisely. He said, this year, it's anyone's championship out there. The fact that the Rams lost the way that they did to the Carolina Panthers, the Rams, let's take a look at the team tier chart here, just to give this a little bit of perspective. I just put it up on the screen. Maybe we can make this take up a little bit more of the screen. But you can see the Rams, they're the only team that is firmly in the upper right of this chart. It doesn't include special teams, and I know that the Rams have had their issues in that phase of the game, but that's the one team that you look at and you say, okay, high-level offense, high-level defense, they've got that combination going for them. They shouldn't lose to the Carolina Panthers, especially with Carolina coming off a short week against the 49ers. But then Matthew Stafford turned into a turnover machine, and the Rams lost to the Panthers. And that was the comment that John Lynch made, which preceded his quote that said, that it's anybody's championship out there this year. If even the team in the very upper right can look like that on any given day, and they looked, I thought, even worse, the Rams did against the 49ers back in week 5 when they lost to the San Francisco Skeleton Crew. Well, if that's possible, then that team is vulnerable. The Colts just lost to the Texans, who've got a great defense but a suspect offense. They're vulnerable. The Green Bay Packers lost at home to the Carolina Panthers. The Kansas City Chiefs, this is a great example. The Chiefs are way out here. They're near the top tier. You see Kansas City, yet they're 6-6. They're losing on a week in, week out basis, it seems. The latest loss came to the Dallas Cowboys, whose defense is probably improving a little bit, but Dallas is playing really, really good offense. The point is that this is wide open. You don't have the same type of cluster that you normally do out here. Like these teams, like the really good contenders, they're strewn all about, and there are a lot of contenders. And, if a few things happen that aren't all that crazy between now and December 28th, and it involves the 49ers and the Bears winning their games, and it means that the Packers, the Rams, and the Seahawks would have to lose some games before then, just one game each from those teams. Then these two teams, the 49ers and the Bears, will play on December 28th, Sunday Night Football at Levi's Stadium for the number 1 seed in the NFC. That fact right there, the fact that that's not a far-fetched proposition for this game, which is happening in 26 days. The fact that these two teams, the Bears of all teams against the 49ers, that a little less surprising if you just looked at opening rosters, but shocking if you consider all the players who have been hurt for San Francisco. The fact that these two teams might be playing for the 1 seed on December 28th, wow. Just wow. And it just shows you that this is wide open. The 49ers have made 4 trades this year. All of those trades seem to have hit as far as what they have needed to fill in for the losses that have come this year. Bryce Huff, Brian Robinson Jr., Sky Moore, Keon White. They've made additions on top of those trades. Cleveland Farrell, he had 9 tackles. John Lynch loved pointing this out. Not only did Cleveland Farrell have 2 sacks, he had 9 tackles as a defensive lineman this past week. That shows hustle. That shows the ability to play the run. You want linebackers to have a lot of tackles. If safeties and DBs have too many tackles, it usually means your team sucks, because it usually means that run games are getting to the second level and there are a lot of pass completions. But if you can get tackles from your defensive linemen, that is the sign of a truly plus defense. That means the ball carriers aren't even reaching the second level. So 9 tackles for Cleveland Farrell this past week. That was awesome. And the 49ers picked him up for free. He was willing to join the practice squad. Kyle Shanahan had a really, really cool quote about that. He said he was humble enough to join the practice squad, and he said, yeah, I'll show you guys. And he has shown the 49ers. He's worked his way up to that 53-man roster for San Francisco. Cleveland Farrell, now second on this team in sacks. He's probably going to be the sack leader of the 2025 49ers by the time all is said and done. Maybe, we'll see how many Bryce Huff gets down the stretch of this season. But I think Bryce is probably going to start getting more double teams, which has already happened. And I think that Cleveland Farrell is going to be one of the beneficiaries. Keon White can be another beneficiary. And speaking of Farrell, the same path is now being followed by Eric Kendricks, the linebacker, signed to the practice squad. I think he's going to have a chance to start maybe right after the bye week. Kyle Shanahan outlined the plan for Eric Kendricks. It was to build his conditioning level over the course of this bye week, and then he's going to have 4 practices, including a Monday bonus practice for the 49ers to show that he's ready to play against Tennessee, where the 49ers will likely move to 1-11. And John talked about that. It was so fascinating with Kendricks, because you're like, whoa, aren't the 49ers still really mad at this guy? He backed out on a commitment to sign with them last offseason. And John said, I was not happy with Eric, but he also said that Eric did his best to make sure that the bridge wasn't burned. Mike Zimmer was Dallas's defensive coordinator in 2024. And Mike had worked with Eric Kendricks. He was his coach in Minnesota where Eric Kendricks was an all-pro linebacker back in 2019. So he knew Mike Zimmer's defense. And Mike Zimmer said, hey, you can play the Mike linebacker, the pun intended, the Mike linebacker for us. And you can call the plays. You can be in the center of the action. And for a proud former All-Pro like Eric Kendricks, that was a really, really good opportunity because the 49ers were only offering him the weak side linebacker spot next to Fred Warner. Was the job that ended up being taken by Devondre Campbell. So Eric Kendricks called John Lynch up and he said, John, I'm so sorry, but Mike Zimmer in Dallas, they're offering me a chance to play Mike linebacker. I haven't signed the contract yet. I know that I committed to come play for you guys, but I hope you understand. And obviously the 49ers and John Lynch were very annoyed at the time. They might have become even more annoyed later that season when Devondre Campbell, who was Kendrick's replacement, quit on the team and walked off the field. But a few months after that, water under the bridge, you've got to move forward. You got to be a professional. Kendricks did his best to explain the situation. The 49ers understood it. And now they're at the point where they really, really needed a linebacker, preferably a veteran one, after both Fred Warner and Tatum Bethune went down. So they monitored the Kendrick situation over the offseason. He actually had a couple surgeries to get fully healthy. They stayed in touch with him. And then John Lynch said once Tatum Bethune went down, the situation became pressing. And they called up Eric Kendricks. And I think for Eric, too, the situation was pressing. I think he wanted to sit out some of this season to get fully healthy, to rest his body. He's 33 years old. This might be the last ride for Eric Kendricks. But at some point, you've got to get into a building. You can't just, wait till January. You've got to join a team to build up that wave toward a potential playoff run. And I think that he saw the 49ers with their need. He had been in touch with the 49ers. He's from Clovis, and he was willing to sign with the practice squad, just like Clelin Ferrell was willing to sign with the practice squad about 1 month ago. So humble enough to accept that, yeah, I might have been an all-pro at one point, practice squad just to prove myself right now. But he had 138 tackles last year. He can play both the Mike and the Will. With Tatum Bethune going down, it might be the Mike linebacker position for Eric Kendricks from the very get-go. Maybe they promote him to the 53-man roster before the Tennessee game if they're happy with practice. But the cool thing is the 49ers have 3 practice squad elevations to use with Kendricks. So they could go out on a trial run for the Tennessee game, and they could plug one of the more gaping holes of this defense right now, that linebacker position. I mean, it has been an issue ever since Fred Warner went down. It became a much bigger issue after Tatum Bethune also went down. We've talked about the potential benefit of a veteran stabilizer at that linebacker position, and Eric Kendricks could be that guy. Imagine if he ends up starting. Clelin Ferrell obviously ends up starting and maybe even leading the 49ers in sacks. That is 2 in-season acquisitions for San Francisco at no cost. Whereas everyone was freaking out about the fact they didn't spend valuable draft capital on somebody like Jalen Phillips. They've added Keon White, who's been awesome, by the way. Might even be more productive than Jalen Phillips. And Keon White only cost a very, very late round draft pick. They've added Keon White, who fits the defense perfectly. John Lynch talked about it today. I've been mentioning it for the past month. Remember the very first live that we did after the 49ers traded for Keon White? We were up on the rooftop in Russian Hill, and we were talking about the fact that he can rush from the inside and how that's going to be perfect for Chris Kasarik. Well, that is fit perfectly for very, very low draft capital. They've added Clelin Ferrell, who has 4 sacks for no draft capital, not virtually. That was free. They signed him to the practice squad. And now Eric Kendricks, also practice squad signee, didn't have to use draft capital. He might be able to plug in at that linebacker position and give the 49ers some really good play. Again, the goal for San Francisco has been to move their logo up. And they were about right here. Do you see where my cursor is? They were right here a few weeks ago. They have moved up and to the right. Up and to the right. This offense, if you only isolate the time that Brock Purdy has been back, is all the way over here already. And that is even with the 3 interceptions against the Carolina Panthers. The 49ers offense with Brock Purdy is elite, period. He's an elite quarterback, elite offense. Could they be even better if Brandon Aiyuk decided to play and gave them at least B-level play? Of course. That's why they signed him to all that money, because he's an integral piece of this offense. But for now, they're assuming they're going to have to make it work without him. They've got the quarterback to make it work without him. That is this guy. It is Brock Purdy. They also have George Kittle, who's a future Hall of Famer, who can make it work without Brandon Aiyuk. They can get to this area offensively. They've already demonstrated that over the course of the past 3 weeks. The big question has been, how much can Robert Saleh elevate this defense? Well, the past 3 weeks have shown that this is on a really good track. Now, the bigger question the 49ers are going to have to face moving forward is, can this defense continue its elevated play, or at least not fall apart against better offenses? Because after the Rams left Levi's, after they had dropped 42 points on the 49ers, I said that the next 4 games are against decreasing offensive capability for the 49ers. It's a perfect time for the defense to build some confidence and find a way to buoy itself before that December 22nd game against the Colts. So they started off against the Cardinals on December 22nd. The Colts are on December 22nd. They started off against the Cardinals 3 weeks ago. They gave up a ton of passing yards, but they did so by design because they were down to 3 defensive ends after Robert Beal Jr. suffered a concussion, and they just tried to keep everything in front of them. Mission accomplished. They did a really good job holding Jacoby Brissett to negative passing efficiency. After 17 games with only 1 interception, the 49ers delivered 2 games with 4 interceptions. I mean, their INT rate absolutely skyrocketed. They didn't get one against Shedeur Sanders. They were close as he was throwing those ducks against the wind, but they did get turnovers in the form of 4th down stops against Cleveland. So you combine the Arizona game where they kept everything in front of them, gave up a lot of yards, but successfully started repairing the defense with the takeaways and the opportunism. You combine that with the Carolina game where they only gave up 9 points, and this Cleveland game where they only gave up 8. 17 points allowed through 2 games. The first 2-game stretch for the 49ers allowing fewer than 10 points since 2019. That was an elite defense. You take all of this growth that we've seen in the past 3 weeks, and I think you can confidently say that this defense is on the track up, on the vertical axis moving north. Now, can they port it to games against the Colts? That offense is way out here. The Chicago Bears, that offense is also good. It's better than any of the offenses the 49ers have been facing over their 3-game hot streak as a defense. And the Seattle Seahawks, but we know that's also a good offense. It's on the right side of the dividing line. And then when the playoffs come around, 49ers are likely to qualify. You're probably going to face another one of the teams that's out in this direction. One of the playoff contenders here in the NFC, Tampa Bay, they actually have a below-average offense. It's hard to believe that Baker Mayfield was in that MVP discussion earlier this year, but a lot of fans like to get ahead of themselves when it comes to that. Media too. Mayfield and company have fallen off, but still, that offense right here, this Tampa Bay offense, even without its full arsenal of receivers, lit up the 49ers defense. That shows you how far this unit has come. They may have a rematch against Tampa Bay in the cards come January. And if they do, they're going to have to show that they can port some of the improvement that we've seen over the past 3 weeks into that matchup. I think I'm ready for some questions. I still want to see if Mike has any comments for me. Mike, if you've got any questions, anything I should handle, anything I should put up on the screen, please do let me know. We can go through some of the SF Data Niners stuff. Always great stuff on Twitter from SF Data Niners, but I'm happy to answer some of these questions. We got $2 from John. Thank you, John. Really appreciate you. That's awesome. Get your name up on the screen. And Mike is texting me. He said that we're good. We don't have anything we need to put up on the screen, and that's fine. Maybe SF Data Niners, though, has something good. I'm going to go look through it. Oh, yeah, this is good. I really like this. This is the Brock Purdy passing chart against the Browns. Came out the other day. As you can see here, there's a lot of red on the underneath stuff. And this really highlights one of the points I was trying to make leaving the Carolina game going into Cleveland. Red is bad. Green is good. Brock Purdy wasn't very efficient on the short passes. In fact, there's only one green cell here, and it was only one pass. It was an 8-yard pass underneath, 1 of 1. It added a lot of EPA, so it must have been a third down conversion for Brock Purdy, short to the left. Everybody coming out of the Carolina game was trying to say, well, okay, well, they've got to throw shorter. The 49ers need to really take care of the football by not taking any chances against Cleveland. And I said, guys, that is not going to be possible against Cleveland because this is one of the most aggressive defenses in the league. You know how the 49ers play wide 9 with their front? Cleveland plays wide 9 mentality under Jim Schwartz with the whole defense. They know how good Myles Garrett is. They know how good this defense is. They were going to take away. They're going to play press. They're going to take away a lot of the short passes. They actually were going to force Brock Purdy to beat them with some more explosive plays over the top. And you could see how that becomes very difficult when Myles Garrett is getting to the quarterback in 1.7 seconds. That's why this Cleveland defense had shut down essentially every offense that it had faced this year, because it puts you into this conundrum of you can't throw short, but you don't have enough time as a QB to throw further down the field. That's where Brock Purdy magic came in. He was pressured 58% of the time, yet he still averaged 8.7 yards on his depth of target, which is far down the field. He did not deal a single turnover-worthy play. And he obviously completed a high percentage of his passes given the difficulty of the throws downfield. That is shown to you by completion percentage over expectation. The green being further down the field is exactly where it had to be. Because as we saw here, the Browns took away the short passes for the 49ers, made them inefficient, but Brock Purdy ate further downfield against the really good pass rush. The only way that you can eat further downfield against a good pass rush is if you can escape the pass rush as a quarterback. Myles Garrett was working on Sunday, but Brock Purdy was working harder. Brock Purdy bested Myles Garrett. Garrett might have bested Trent Williams and the 49ers offensive line, but he didn't best Brock Purdy. And that's where the elite quarterback play comes in. Purdy is number 1 in the entire league in pressure to sack ratio. I had this stat up for you yesterday. We're going to put it back up for you today. It is one of the most important statistics that there is when it comes to evaluating quarterback play. It's from Jeff Deeney. They track this kind of stuff on Pro Football Focus. Pressure to sack ratio is something that is only good if a quarterback has a strong base, has good mobility, has excellent feel for the pocket, and a quick release. Like, you have to have at least 2 of those attributes. Brock Purdy has every single one of those attributes. Here is the pressure to sack ratio. I've got it on the screen in maybe 3 seconds. Sometimes I have to scroll through X and Twitter and find some of this stuff, but here you go. Look at the gap between Purdy and the rest of the league. 5.8%. Prescott's number 2 at 9.7%, then Bo Nix and Sam Darnold. 5.8% is downright elite. What we saw the other day was Purdy throwing the ball away 7 times. I mean, some of the throwaways were elite plays. Some of those passes, I don't know how he got them out of bounds, how he avoided the sack, but I mean, then there were completions, like there was one to Juszczyk where it looked certain that Myles Garrett was going to get him. Instead of a 7-yard loss on a sack, it turned into a 4-yard gain. I mean, these are massive, massive swings. I mean, 10, 11-yard swings at a time because you're not getting up the sack, and instead it's either no gain, which is fine, or a positive gain, even if it's 4 or 5 yards. That's really, really good. And Purdy does this better than anybody in the league. The 49ers offensive line this year has been relatively average in pass protection. They've been above average when it comes to the run blocking. I've got some nice charts for the offensive line for you guys right here. We can take a look at them. This is from Ben Baldwin. It's got to pop this one open on the screen. So first, pass protection, 49ers are right at the origin of the graph, right in the middle. Funny, they're right next to the Titans, who they play next. Run blocking for the 49ers, you want to be further to the right, further up. Well, the run blocking for San Francisco has graded out well. But a team that delivers good run blocking and average pass protection is a team that could really, really use the best escape artist in the game at quarterback, and that's who the 49ers have. That's why they can be elite offensively. It's because of this guy right here, Brock Purdy. And by the way, you should sign up for the San Francisco Standard. You probably have a few free posts, as you could tell here. But if you sign up, then you're going to get the best 49ers coverage that there is. If you want to take a look at the other side of this, pass rush, the 49ers obviously have not graded out well in pass rush because they've lost Nick Bosa and Yetur Gross-Matos, so the Yetur should be back after the bye week for San Francisco. Run defense for San Francisco, when it comes to win rate, has graded better than the league average. Now, it's funny because PFF doesn't rank the 49ers run defense well. I think it's because they're more of a team-oriented run defense. The PFF score is going to be cumulative individual grades. But I think the proof is in the pudding. The 49ers rank as around the number 10 or the number 11 run defense in the league. And so much of this is perspective, too. They were number 29 last year when it came to EPA against the run. This year, they have improved to number 10. All right, I'm off to the questions now. Let's go. Brandon Aiyuk would not have to go through the waiver process if he's released. That's only for guys on rookie contracts or in the first few years of their NFL tenures. Once you've signed a big contract, if you're released, you're free to sign anywhere else. So he is indeed vested enough to not have to go through waivers if he is released. No, I did not make that one chart. That's why I credit Ben Baldwin for making those charts. He's got a great website that has a lot of the charts, but the main one being the team tier chart. This is all from Ben Baldwin's site, so make sure you go support him. He's on Twitter. He is a Seahawks fan, but he's been he's an analytics guy, right? He does a very good job. I believe he's from Seattle. He initially started covering the Seahawks, but he's very objective in the way that he's able to bring across some of the information and some of the data. Here's a good question. Will BA play a couple games just to show his skills are still sharp, even if he wants to leave since he's been out so long? It seems sensible. Not that he's been making sense. That's what I'm saying. Like, he had not followed the rational path here. So, yeah, in a rational situation, I think Brandon Aiyuk would want to get back out on the football field, even if he doesn't want to stay with the 49ers, because he does need to market himself. He also, I would think anybody would want/need money. And if you're violating your contract, then money is going to be taken away from you, whether it be through the voiding of 2026 guarantees. That's already happened, but 2025 pay can also be recouped. Teams protect themselves in these contracts. And so, I mean, you execute a deal assuming that there's going to be some level of rational behavior, some understanding that, if I don't play, money's going out the window. But if Brandon Aiyuk is not acting rationally, then all these mechanisms that the 49ers have put in to protect themselves, they'll actually have to use those mechanisms. They'll actually have to recoup some of the money. They'll have to impose a standard that needs to be followed by all the players whom they employ, right? Like, it's that's standard business operating procedure. A business, or a team in this case, has to protect itself. So yeah, in a sensible situation, if Aiyuk is cleared, he would play. But it doesn't seem like there is a lot of sense to this whole situation, especially to Aiyuk's side of things. And, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of sense to how Aiyuk was behaving before he signed a deal. If the 49ers made a mistake here, I would argue that it was that they ignored some of the red flags that were happening during the negotiation and back in 2024. They probably, they really wish they would have traded Brandon Aiyuk now. I'm sure they regretted the contract right after. When you see some of those red flags, you have to determine, well, is the player just trying to out-leverage you? Is the player just trying to negotiate? Or is this going to be something that persists after the contract is signed? Clearly, it has persisted after the contract was signed, but hindsight's also 2020. The 49ers could have made the trade then and been free of this situation, but then also not had their ex-receiver in 2024. And At the time, they didn't know that he was going to tear his ACL. At the time, they were trying to run back 2023. They were operating under a different set of circumstances and a different mentality in 2024 than they are right now. Obviously, what's happened since the contract has been signed has changed the calculus for the 49ers. So, unfortunately for them, it's not an optimal situation, but at least they did put some protections into the contract to be able to get out of this thing earlier than it initially seemed, based on the behavior of Brandon Aiyuk, which has allowed the 49ers to go into their protection recourses in that deal. Shout out to Visalia from Moonman, V-Town. Haven't heard that name for Visalia in a while, that nickname, but yes, it is Visalia. Any more questions? I'm seeing a lot of comments, not a lot of questions. I don't know what number Eric Kendricks is wearing yet, because Eric Kendricks was in the locker room, but not in uniform. He wasn't activated for the 49ers. So we will see what number he is wearing out at the bonus practice on Monday. Well, actually, I believe I saw on the roster that he's at 43. But that might also change because he hasn't taken the field yet in a game. Once he is wearing a number on the field on game day, he's locked into that. Yeah, I think he actually was number 43 when I saw the list. But we'll see if that sticks, because I don't think that 43 is a particularly aesthetically pleasing number. Do I think Juszczyk will sit for the Titans game? I don't know. It depends on how the rib starts healing. It is a pain tolerance thing on many levels for broken ribs. It's probably not going to fully heal until 6 weeks out from now, but depending on how he feels, especially after he gets injected, and then he's going to be wearing a little jacket to protect the ribs, that's going to determine whether or not Kyle Juszczyk can play against the Tennessee Titans. That kick was crazy. Younghoe Koo last night just kicking the ground. That was wild. I've always wondered too, everything seems so perfectly choreographed on those kicks, the steps and everything. But if something is a tiny bit off, I've always wondered, what happens if you just kick off the holder's hand? I would always be worried if I'm the holder that 5 of my finger, my entire hand is going to be broken, and all my fingers are going to be broken as well. Because if the kick, they're swinging hard with their leg. And that just requires being a few inches off. So if I'm the holder for Younghoe Koo last night and the New York Giants, I would actually be thankful that he kicked the ground instead of my hand, because I think both would be possible. I haven't seen the hand happen, but if hitting the ground is possible, then I would think that hitting the hand definitely is. Is Mrs. Lombardi going to the Titans game? Possibly. We shall see. TBD. She's going to be in San Francisco, but we'll see if she's headed to the Titans game. We got to get her tickets if she is. Though I don't think we have tickets yet for that game. If anybody has tickets for the Titans game, let me know. You could probably help Lombardi herself. I think my parents want to go to that game as well, so got to get on top of that. Will I grow a playoff beard for luck? Well, I wouldn't do it for luck. I'm just covering the team, but if you'd like me to grow a playoff beard for fun on the YouTube channel, that's why I'd do it. Younghoe Koo said that he saw the ball move, and that's why he kicked the ground. Oh, so he did it on purpose? That seemed like an awfully hard kick of the ground to do it on purpose. I didn't watch any of the press conferences after that game, but that was weird. We got special teams EPA. Mike sent me. I made a big deal about the 49ers being number 1 ever since the Seattle game in special teams EPA. They are getting very, very close to overtaking Seattle for number 1, all games included. Let's take a look at it right here. I got to get it up on the screen. I've got way too many windows open, guys. I have way too many windows open. So I'm working through things right here. But we should have this in just a matter of seconds. Here we go. It is such a trip to see the 49ers at the top of this list. I mean, they're number 2 technically. They've added 44 expected points through special teams, which is a lot. That's a hell of a lot of points. 44 spread out around across a lot of close games. You're winning a lot more games than you would have won with that type of special teams, because you could also be in the negative. Like last year, the 49ers were basically the Saints. They were the worst special teams in the league. So one could argue that they've added about 80 plus points versus their 2024 performance over the course of the 13 games they played so far. I mean, I could do some very quick math here. Let's say that they've added 80 points versus last year through special teams, since they're in the positives instead of the negatives. That's 6 points a game. They've added a touchdown a game relative to last year of special teams value. No wonder they're 9-4, despite all the injuries. I mean, this has been the 49ers' ace in the hole. Such a good development for San Francisco. All right, we got all the news out for you this morning. I'm sure I'll talk to you a little bit later, but thanks for watching. Brandon Aiyuk, not a good development for the 49ers, at least in John Lynch's attitude about the situation. Ball's in Brandon Ayuk's court. Doesn't sound like he wants to pass it back. But Brock Purdy is doing the Dougie. Maybe that's going to become a weekly thing for San Francisco. Everybody check out the San Francisco Standard. It's on you to sign up right now. This is where the best 49ers coverage is going to be. Hit the subscribe button on the channel as well. We are approaching 100,000. Seriously, we're over 95,000. Everybody go hit that sub button right now. You've slowed down in the subscriptions. I'm not happy about that. They should be speeding up as this calendar turns to December. So hit the sub button right now on YouTube. Hit the like button. Do all that. And then go check out the San Francisco Standard. All of that would be much, much appreciated. We'll talk to you soon.